right, thank you very much, Joshua Ojito, for that report there. Of course, now you know that you're watching 2020 in retrospect, and right about now we'll be looking at power sector. Access to power is something that has been a challenge for decades for us in Nigeria, but there's been efforts, so we want to look at how 2020 fared and what are the projections as we begin the new year. We have Engineer Farouk Yusuf Yabo. He's joining us via Zoom in Sokoto. He's the Acting Director of Renewable Energy and Raw Power Access, Chairman Mambila Project Delivery Committee from the Federal Ministry of Power. Thank you very much for joining us, Engineer Yabo.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, and here with us in Abuja studio is Mr. Abba Aliyu. He's the SA to the Minister of Power on Policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ruth, for having me here.
Okay, let me get back to Engineer Yabo. Happy New Year. I didn't say that to you. It's the start of the year, but let's take stock for 2020. How would you say the power sector fared for the year 2020?
Much root. I think reflecting back on 2020, the Nigerian economy was powered by, or rather was provided power from three sources, mainly the national grid, which comprises of the generation, transmission and distribution. And then, of course, the off-grid systems, which are now becoming a common thing around the country. Of course, largely then the self-generated power. So I would like to focus specifically here on the grid power supply, which truly has surprised many experts in the sense that whereas there is major impact, negative impact on the COVID-19 on the sector, but we've seen some new trends which are quite amazing. Typically, in this kind of the time of the year, January, December, is a peak of the dry season. And so we usually have very poor supplies. But it seems we have consistently been adding new capacity, has been hitting new targets, or rather new high peaks, which is quite unusual in the history of the power sector. For instance, just on the 11th of December, we had the highest energy generated per any day of the year, which is well over 115 megawatt hours. This was up from another peak that was reached in April, which was around 112 megawatt hours. This is quite unusual in the sense that the dams are supposed to be going down. And also we have a lot of challenges importing equipment as a regard of restrictions with travels. Also added to this is another dimension of having highest peaks in this kind of time. So I would rather say, if I reflect back in what has happened over the last 10-15 years, this is a new trend that I believe is courtesy of some of the activities that has happened in 2020. Added to this also, I can see the off-grid space has also seen an unusual improvement in the sense that just last 3 months, the Honorable Minister of Power and indeed other officials of government had commissioned close to 30 or 40 projects. I can remember just this December, there were a commissioning of 8 projects in Adamawa State. Precisely, the commissioning was done in Mubi, but the projects are spread across Adamawa State. The same thing previously, in the previous month, about 12 projects, also mini-grid projects, were commissioned in Kano. Just before that, also, a lot of other projects were commissioned. So clearly, whereas we are not anywhere close to where we should be, and we need to work even harder, but one that has been following trends can see clearly that despite the COVID-19, the 2020 year has not been too bad for the power sector. I think I will stop here at this particular time. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Engineer Yabo. We'll definitely get back to you. Now, Mr. Aliyu, from what Engineer Yabo has said, there's been improvement in the power sector if we're looking at generation of power. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I will agree with what Engineer Farouk mentioned. To assess how the Nigerian power sector performed in 2020, we need to reflect back in terms of how is the reform process in the Nigerian electricity market taking place. Now, if you are following the trend, you know that the Nigerian power sector was privatized, and there has been the privatization is a long-term process. It's not something that would just happen and a lot of changes happen. It's a process that takes time over time, and this, if you reflect, not only in Nigeria, globally, where they have privatized their power sector, you will realize that immediately after the privatization, there was the emergence of a lot of different challenges. And even in the Nigerian sector, after the privatization, new challenges emerged, which were before the privatization were not there. Before the privatization, like what Engineer Yabo mentioned, the generation, transmission, and the distribution were all under one monopoly, under the government. But now you have a situation whereby you privatize, and the 100% of the generation, it's been owned by private sector, and you have the transmission being owned by federal government, and you have also the distribution, most of it owned by the private sector with some stake owned by federal government. Now, when you have a situation where before the privatization, it's one particular entity that manages the entire value chain of the power sector, and now you come to a situation whereby there are diverse entities owning the different segment of the sector, there definitely be new challenges that will emerge. And now when the government of Mr. President came into being, they inherited the sector at the time when it was just privatized. So we just came, and there were just the emergence of these new challenges. For example, one of the key challenges that we inherited is the misalignment of capacity along the electricity value chain. What I mean here is you have a situation where you have a generation capacity of about 13,000 megawatt, and you have a transmission that has a capacity less than what can be generated, that ranges between 7,000 to 8,000 megawatt, and you have also a distribution segment of the value chain that has far less than what can be transmitted. So we have that situation, and that misalignment along the electricity value chain yields further challenges of market liquidity, because when you generate, you have to, the generation company have to get paid for what they generate. But if it's not all what they generate can be transmitted and distributed, then there's misalignment of that, and that difference has to be paid by the market. So this government, as it comes, the first thing the Honorable Minister did is to take stock of all these challenges and now come up with 5 key point policy focus areas. And the first one is to align the infrastructure, ensuring that what we generate can be transmitted and can be distributed. So that's his first key focus area. The second focus area is also to look at, apart from all the population that are on the grid, there are a number of Nigerians that are not completely connected with the grid. How do you serve them? We have the Rural Electrification Board that has that mandate to do it. So he also said that another focus area is to focus on that key area of those without access. The second one, the third area of focus is to also address the market liquidity. We have a situation whereby what it's being generated or what is being distributed, the distribution companies do not have the capacity to recollect all the payment for what they distribute to the public. So there is a misalignment of payment in that. So to also focus in that area to address that. Then there is also the issue of coordination. When you have, for example, like I mentioned earlier, a sector that is under one entity are now broken into different entities, there is the problem of coordination. Every single entity will now say that, okay, I'm doing my own thing based on our own priority as a company. So there is that misalignment. So there is need to make sure that you harness that focus into one key objective of providing Nigerians with reliable and quality electricity.
More like a seamless process.
Exactly. Then the last area of his focus is to also say the project, the federal government project that we inherited, legacy project, is to see that we complete them so that the generation capacity can be show up. For example, we have the Mambila project, the Kashimbila, that Inkoa, a number of generation capacity. So he also focused in that area. So the first in last year, what we achieved are various initiatives or projects under each of this segment. When you take under the alignment of infrastructure along the electricity value chain, we have the Presidential Power Initiative, the Siemens project, which in the history of the country, for the first time, we have an intervention that it's been done along the entire value chain of the electricity, from generation down to transmission down to distribution. Even there's aspect of a central metering data management system that is being imbibed into that project. So this is a novel project, that initiative that it's been done. We have also under the electricity access on the 21st July 2020, Mr. President approved the Nigerian Economic Sustainability Plan, under which there's a particular intervention of providing 5 million solar home system for Nigerians. And under that plan, we are presently implementing that plan to provide 5 million Nigerians that are not connected with the grid with electricity. So that's another area of intervention that we are looking into it.
Okay. Let me hold your thoughts there, because we have a guest joining us from Lagos via Zoom, and he's not going to be talking about power, but looking at the oil and gas sector, which, we want to find out how we thrive. Let's make welcome Mr. Bala Zaka. He's a public affairs analyst and petroleum engineer. Thank you very much, Mr. Zaka, for joining us.
Thank you and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too. Maybe I should just go right away ahead and, go with the first question. Oil, we know, represents 80% of the country's export, 30% of the banking sector credit, and about 50% of overall government revenue. If you want to, throw back 2020, what would you say?
Well, thank you for that question. Crude oil revenues in the context of Nigeria constitute what I can say probably a high quantity of the oxygen of Nigeria's revenue. But when we are now talking about the global pandemic, that was a global calamity. I mean, that global calamity affected everybody, and it basically restricted movement, basically, and it led to the cutting down of investment, and movements were basically restricted of activities that have to do with the oil and gas industry. For example, we have Nigerians that are probably based in Nigeria and are working in the North Sea. We have Nigerians that are based in Nigeria and are working in Arctic regions like Alaska. And we have some Nigerians based in Nigeria but are working in desert areas like the Middle East, all in the oil and gas industry. And it's the same way we also had expats in different parts of the world that were supposed to come to Nigeria just because of the activities. And like all of us know, when you talk about the oil and gas industry, you're talking about a global community and you're talking about a global commodity also. So based on what happened, to a reasonable extent, we saw the scaling down of investment. But we knew that even if, and as I speak, we have not actually exited the pandemic, but we knew that even if we didn't exit the pandemic just like we are now, we will get to a point where we knew that we were just going to require energy, and we will never allow the world to get grounded or grind to a halt because energy was going to be required. So, but it was a dull moment for everybody. Lessons have been learned. We are still in the pandemic, but moving forward, I mean, we see the oil industry bouncing back because energy is required and there is a need for aggregate movement and mobility of activities.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zaka. We'll get back to you, but let's head to Sokoto to join Engineer Yabo. Engineer Yabo, Abba here has talked about, some of the challenges the power sector faced and some of the policies, put in place to, address some of those challenges. But for the consumer now, there was this fluctuation of tariffs, you agree with me, there was fluctuation in terms of pricing for the consumer. What would you say, looking at 2021 now, we're just starting, for what every Nigerian wants is just an access to power and be able to afford it?
Thank you very much again, Ruth. I think the issue of tariffs are largely legal issues. Here I mean the Act, the Electric Power Sector Reform Act of 2005 established the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission and require of it as of law to ensure a balance between the customers and the investors. And so it's largely something that is beyond the realm of the policy space. Having said that, usually the way you track and determine progress in energy supply, particularly electricity, is determining the extent of infrastructure development that is happening and, of course, the quality of service. So while it is at this stage very difficult to determine whether or not we are actually at a cost-reflective tariff as required by law, one could say that it's an issue of a chicken or egg. Sometimes people tend to believe that first, make sure the power supply gets to 24/7, improve high quality before you increase your tariffs. And I largely agree with that particular philosophy. And that's why, as we speak today, the current tariff regime was designed in such a way that it is a service-based tariff. Service-based tariffs means the investors, the utilities, are prohibited from increasing their tariffs without increasing the quality of service. And so to effect this particular oversight, a number of service level agreements were signed. And for most of the customers that will be seeing increase in tariffs, it's only going to be if they will have power supply of up to minimum of 20 hours to 24 hours in the category A, that's band 1, band A. For those that are going to have a slight increase would be those that will have tariffs from 16 hours to and above, to maybe 18 hours, 20 hours, and that way. So for customers that are in agrarian areas that are not likely or have not started enjoying electricity, the policy position and even the regulatory position as we speak is that they should not be having to bear any cost without such an increase. So clearly the energy industry is a highly intensive industry, and I've reflected back earlier that we have seen an unusual progress. I've taken time to check why is that, and what I have found is that whereas the entire value chain, generation, transmission, and distribution have done significantly well in terms of putting in one or two things, particularly the generation side. The main drive has been the distribution companies, probably on the account of this increased service level agreement, which is highly imposed by the regulator, have started taking responsibility for ensuring that customers are getting power supplied to them, especially in those areas where they have the tariffs given out. So to a large extent, whereas at this stage it's quite difficult, I know the tariff was suspended from April to September on the account of COVID, but it would be very difficult for a country like ours with so many demands to continue to pay trillions of naira in subsidies. Having said that, we could all see that on account of technological advancements, sources of power supply like solar has continuously become cheap. And as we speak, a lot of countries are getting their supplies in the sub-tens of dollar cents per kilowatt hour, which will be much lower than the current tariffs we have. So I foresee in going forward that as we expand and we aggregate, the tariffs are likely going to be more reasonable. And it's really important for the regulators to continue to insist in the utilities ensuring that it's only those customers who are premium customers that will be impacted by this tariff at this time. Of course, the Honorable Minister has made it very, very clear that everything and anything that we must do as a sector must be reflective of the poor, as directed by His Excellency Mr. President. So to a large extent, there is quite a number of palliatives coming. For instance, the issue of the metering that is beginning out. We're doing a lot of energy efficiency campaigns, promotion of standards and levels that will allow for very small usage of electricity based on improvement in devices, as well as, of course, the recent 5 million connections through the Nigerian Economic Support Program, which the Ministry of Power is leading alongside the Rural Electrification Agency and the Niger Delta Power Holding Company. So I think by and large, it's a very important issue for everyone in the country to understand that whereas the power sector has been privatized, there is still that willingness by government to continue to support and ensure that the tariffs are within the range. But the law also requires that there has to be balance between the quality of service vis-a-vis the revenues that the distribution companies or the utility in general will be able to take. Thank you.
Thank you, Engineer Yabo. Definitely, you just hit the nail right in the head there. And the proposed solar home system project, which is meant to cater for people who are not, currently, connected to the national grid. Now, the target is 5 million households for 25 million individuals. How would that help to promote local production?
Okay, I think if you look at the guideline that Central Bank of Nigeria provided for the implementation of the program, you will realize that it was systematically designed to achieve the objectives of the economic sustainability program. And that is one, stimulating economic activities, and secondly, creating job opportunities. So the guideline provided for manufacturers, in the investors or private parties that wants to establish a solar panel assembly plant within the country, have the opportunity to access a low-cost funding that will be used for the establishment of that. Beyond that also, at the same time, even those that will import but still add some value on the panels, they also have that opportunity to access funding. So to answer your question, the guideline, the way it was structured systematically to, one, make sure that Nigerians have the panels, have access to a solar home system or mini grid, but at the same time, at the back end, make sure that it creates job opportunities and stimulate economic activities. When we were analyzing the program, we have identified a number of areas where job opportunities can be created. One is even revenue collectors. The scheme has provided in such a way that you install the solar home system to individuals and the repayment will be over time. Now within that time, there is need for that investor that installed the solar homes to employ Nigerians that will be going over a defined period of time to collect payment for that till that individual pays off the entire cost of that solar home system. So that's a line of job opportunities that has been created. There is also the line of job opportunities created for those that will do the installation or servicing of that solar panels. And for the mini grid also, you have that opportunities being created for those that will do the installation, the management of the mini grid, and also collection of the payment for the electricity that has been generated through the mini grid. So it was carefully crafted to create that job opportunities, and that is why the target is to generate 250,000 direct job opportunities out of the scheme, and that is what we are now presently tracking.
Already creating power generation.
Exactly. So creating the power generation and at the same time creating job opportunities.
Who are the main beneficiaries? You know, it could just be out there, but who are the targeted beneficiaries? Is it those in the rural communities or in the peri-urban?
Yes, so the target beneficiaries are the individuals, Nigerians that are not completely served or underserved. So it's categorically categorized them. When Engineer Farouk Yabo was analyzing the tariff, he mentioned those that will not bear increase in tariff. So those are those that fall under the category of underserved. So those can benefit from that, and those that are not completely connected with the grid will also benefit from the scheme.
Okay, we're heading to Lagos right now to join Bala Zaka. And Bala Zaka, taking a cue from the power sector, we've heard of policies, you know, that were put in place in the year 2020 to ensure that the sector thrive. But looking at the oil and gas sector, we saw a sharp drop in crude oil because of the pandemic. Now, not just Nigeria was affected, the world was affected. What would you say in terms of policies, you know, that were put in place to ensure that irrespective of the odds, it thrives?
Well, you know, when you talk about policies, we know what is happening to the petroleum industry bill. I mean, I wouldn't want to say much about that. It's been lying there for probably 10 years now. And based on that, you don't expect anybody to see Nigeria as an investment destination if you want to be real to ourselves or want to be realistic. Because if you were a director and you were sent from overseas to come to Nigeria and you've been waiting for the past 10 years so that we are going to put our regulatory standards, fix so many things within the oil and gas industry so for you to invest. If after 10 years you keep telling your directors that you are waiting for the Nigerian regulatory standards to be fixed, between you and I, you're going to be fired. I mean, it's as straightforward as that. But let us also look at the oil and gas industry generally. I mean, Nigeria is really, really rich, because when you look at it, I mean, we have probably like 7 potential basins. The first one is the prolific Niger Delta Basin that we know is doing very, very well. We have also discovered crude oil or hydrocarbon in the Dahomey Basin. And when we talk about Dahomey Basin, we are referring to Lagos axis. We have discovered hydrocarbon in the Anambra Basin. I mean, recently also we discovered hydrocarbon in the Benue Trough into Dongola Basin. Then we also have additional basins that we are looking up to that are very, very potential, like the Sokoto Basin, the Bidda Basin, and the Lake Chad Basin. So in terms of hydrocarbon endowments, whether you talk about crude oil or gas, I mean, we don't have shortage of that. I think one of the major things that we need to do, like you rightly said, in the context of Nigeria, is to make sure the policies are right so that we can attract the right investors. Once the policies are right, we are going to get so many things in order. Another thing, again, we need to look at is even the volume of endowment. I mean, when you were talking about also like gas, in your prologue, we have more than 200 trillion cubic feet of proved gas reserve, and we have a potential of 600 trillion cubic feet. And when you say proved gas reserve, all you are saying is based on the existing technology that we have, we can scoop almost 200 trillion cubic feet of gas. From just that gas alone, I mean, we can treat the gas and make sure we drive gas turbines to generate electricity. We can also use the same gas. I mean, from that same gas, we can get ammonia. From ammonia, we can get urea. And urea is a component of fertilizer. And we can use that to boost agriculture. From the same endowment on the crude oil side, I mean, we belong to OPEC, or Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. We can always get help from that OPEC cartel, like the Saudi Arabia, the Malaysia, and the rest. Even in terms of the gas endowment, if we need support, we can always get support because Nigeria is a member of gas exporting countries. So if we can internally domesticate, especially now that we have this COVID or pandemic ravaging everywhere, if we can look inwards and domesticate, we will save ourselves from exchange rate differentials. And what I mean by that simply is, within Nigeria, let us get the crude oil from Nigeria in Naira. Move them to the respective refineries that we should fix and have in Naira. Refine them in Naira, distribute to Nigerians in Naira, free ourselves from exchange rate differentials. And even when it comes to the hauling of crude oil, another transportation means that we should look into now is called pipeline transportation. We don't need to allow heavy trucks coming to Apapa or leaving the northern axis of Nigeria and coming to the south, destroying our roads and causing carnage. We can pipe these refined products and distribute them to different parts.
Okay, we seem to be having poor signal there with Bala Zaka via Zoom. We joined him in Lagos, but we'd like to thank him. He's a public affairs analyst and petroleum engineer. But if we can connect back to him, okay, all right, I'm told he's back. So Bala Zaka, I'm calling you an engineer. Well, go ahead. You were saying something. Can you add for us your 2021 projection for the oil and gas sector, briefly?
Well, my 2021 projection is that Nigeria and the global community requires energy, and the oil and gas industry is still the mainstay of energy. If coal is still being used by developed nations, and developed economies, then crude oil
All right, the network is not really friendly there. Thank you very much once again, Bala Zaka. Right, and let's head to Sokoto. Engineer Farouk Yabo is still there. We're in 2021, obviously. You've talked about, Abba here has talked about policies. You have talked about ways of addressing some of the challenges, the tariffs and all of that. Distribution, access is all what Nigerians are craving for. And as the power sector re-strategize, to make 2021 a better year for consumers, what would you tell Nigerians at this time?
Thank you very much again, Ruth. I think I would like to reflect back on what Abba said earlier. As we speak, looking ahead, the sector via the ministry has 5 key focus areas, which I believe, if judiciously pursued, should be able to lead us to better prospects. Number 1 is the issue of addressing the liquidity problems of the sector. It is very important for the sector to exit out of the current subsidy regime. And happily enough, based on policies under the Power Sector Recovery Program, the World Bank and other donor agencies are working with the sector to actually create an exit route through providing loans that will allow for capping out of the subsidies in terms of the shortfall in the electricity market, that will still allow for the payment of the generation cost, transmission cost, and distribution cost, including metering and so on, without having to continuously maintain the status quo. I believe this is being pursued vigorously by all stakeholders involved. So, secondly, the issue of alignment of the value chain. Abba did mention the fact that as we speak, we have about 13,000 megawatts of installed capacity, whereas our generation transmission stands around 8,000. Meanwhile, the total delivered peak power remains at 5,500. So the Siemens program, which is mainly coming to align the value chain, I think should be one of those things that we need to see value in. The target is by the end of 2021 to have 7,000 megawatts, and by the end of 2023, 11,000, and so on to 2025, where we have 25 megawatts. I think this is being complemented strongly by the current TCN Transmission Rehabilitation and Expansion Program, which is also heavily supported by the donors. I think we currently have about $1.6 billion available for this particular work. The third one was the issue of the legacy projects like Mambila, project like Zungeru, project like Kashimbila, Dadinkowa. Happily enough, 2020 has seen us completing and energizing Kashimbila and Dadinkowa projects. It has taken us to almost over 80% of completion in Zungeru, 700 megawatts. Of course, we are mostly aware of the significant progress that we've made in Mambila hydropower project, where in the last 6-7 months that we took over as a presidential committee, we have been able to do quite a number of things. As we speak, surveyors are on site, enumerators are on site, trying for the first time to ensure that Mambila actually has a project site. So I think these are very significant development in 2020, which we intend to build on in 2021. Of course, Abba also mentioned about the access to power upgrade. Like I've said, one of the exciting things that I can reflect back in 2020 to be very proud is the fact that we have been able to, for the first time, establish a central data management system for the country, where for the first time we have mapped the entire 11 and 33 kV PDAs across the country in 22 states. So what that means is we have been able to map up to 55,000 kilometers of low voltage lines, which means in 22 states today, we're able to sit down on our computers and see exactly which village has been connected and which village is far away from the grid. And so it helps least cost electrification planning, which are all fundamental issues that if the power sector should move forward, we should have to digitalize it. We should have to create a very transparent process of seeing what kind of progress we are making as against a situation where people will sit down and say we have so megawatts or we have so grid extension without having to allow the public to be able to interrogate those numbers. Again, Abba talked about coordination. I think this is the most important single thing that the sector needs today. There must be individuals who take full responsibility in terms of giving direction. The power sector cannot be driven through various ad hoc interventions, and this is something that I think has the sector has suffered from 2010. Even when the presidential power initiative, presidential power committee was in place, where the real ownership and responsibility were not there. It got to a level where if there is a system collapse, you don't know who to hold responsible. But I think today, with the support of the leadership of the country and indeed the ministry, we are beginning to see some level of discipline and direction. Of course, the regulatory agency has been doing quite a great job. Support is coming from all over, the Federal Ministry of Finance, the Central Bank of Nigeria. But I think all of this support should be well coordinated if we are going to make progress. This could be the single
Engineer Yabo, let me hold your thoughts there. Engineer Yabo, can you hear me? Let me hold your thoughts there. Talking about progress, and you have mentioned a lot of projects, that has been put in place. About 30 to 40 were commissioned, last year and all of that. Very briefly, you have to be brief this time around. 2021, it's one thing to have this project being commissioned, or being installed. It's one thing to have, it's another thing to have them being protected. I'm talking about vandalism. What is the, projection to curtail that, to curb it rather, the issue of vandalism of some of these projects? Engineer Yabo.
Main issue is stakeholder engagement. I think like I've said earlier, we were a bit surprised that despite the COVID and of course despite the security challenges, we have not seen a major impact that is coming negatively on infrastructure. What we have seen is inability to probably import things, so looking at just local supplies.
Okay.
But the key issue for the sector in terms of maintaining infrastructure should be a continuous stakeholder engagement with both the sub-national government, the local government, and indeed the community and the customers at large.
All right. Thank you very much, Engineer Farouk Yusuf Yabo. Thank you very much for your contribution. He's the Acting Director, Renewable Energy and Rural Power Access, Chairman, Mambila Project Delivery Committee from the Ministry of Power. Thank you. Once again, we joined him via Zoom in Sokoto. Okay, and we also like to thank Bala Zaka once again in Lagos. We lost you talking about the connection. Well, thank you very much for your contribution. We look forward to a better year, even if crude oil prices are down for the year 2021. Thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you, and Happy New Year once more.
Happy New Year to you too. So Abba Aliyu, I'm left with you now. So what are your final thoughts? We've looked at so many things, that has played out for 2020, and we want 2021 to be better. I want to sleep and wake up and know that there's power all the time. So what are your projections?
Yeah, I think Engineer Farouk Yabo has said it all. The power sector currently is undergoing a lot of initiative and policies. What is important is in 2021 is for us to see the implementation of these policies. The Presidential Power Initiative, the federal government has established the FGN Power Co. That is an SPV with the responsibility for the implementation of the Presidential Power Initiative, and that is a great achievement. And we are very optimistic this 2021 we will see a lot of implementation of the project under the Presidential Power Initiatives. They had already determined phase 1, 2 and 3, and even on that phase 1 they have determined quick wins. That is project that can easily be done, and a lot of Nigeria to start to see the impact of it. So it's beyond talking, it's for Nigeria to start to see the result, and I'm optimistic in 2021 we'll start to see the impact of that. Then the implementation of the 5 million solar homes is something that I'm also very optimistic that in 2021 we'll start to see it. In fact, this particular month, January, a number of deployments will commence, because currently one manufacturer, 8 companies for the solar home system and 6 for the mini grid had already been pre-qualified, and they would access this funding, and the implementation will start very soon. And there will also be engagement with a state rural electrification board for the implementation of that. So you mentioned that. Then another thing also that will happen this year is the metering. We expect that in this particular year there will be a lot of metering activities that will happen. We already 1 million meters have been provided. Mr. President has provided a matching order for the massive rollout of metering under the national metering plan.
Which is one major challenge, metering.
Exactly. Yeah. And that is why I think the presidential directive for the sector to make sure that metering gap it's been bridged, and that is why Central Bank of Nigeria provided funding for the metering. Already 1 million meters have been distributed, and the next batch under phase 1 will also commence this particular month. So that's another activity that we will see within this particular year.
And from what you're saying, there's a whole lot that is going to play out in the year 2021. But the issue of public-private partnership in terms of investment opportunities, what is the sector doing about that?
So I think if you see the main purpose of reforming the electricity sector is to drive investment, and that was why the federal government removed itself from the management of the sector. And the essence of that is to say that, okay, you as an investor come and put in your money for you to participate in the sector. So in the generation arm of the sector, we will see a lot of investors. The Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading Company that has the mandate of negotiating power purchase agreement with investors has a portfolio of line investors that are ready to invest in the generation. And the regulator has been very innovative also in coming up with a regulation that will also stimulate investment in the distribution, which is a key area of that. Beyond that, also the regulator has come up with the MAP, Meter Asset Provider Regulation, that also provided an investment opportunities for private sector in the metering arm of the sector. We have also the franchise model, also where private sector also will help in getting a franchise area within a distribution area to also invest and help in collection of the money and also making some margin out of it. So the main aim of all this intervention is to continue to stimulate this investment within the sector, and which in turn creates a lot of job opportunities.
Okay, and I needed to answer this question very briefly. If my director said 20 seconds, if you please, what is your message to Nigerians for them to have that confidence once again, when we're looking at power generation for everyone?
I think Nigerians should be very hopeful. I think I'm aware that we are all frustrated with the power sector, but just to understand that addressing the power challenge is something that takes time. Projects takes a longer period of time before we start to realize their benefits. So let's be hopeful hopeful, and I'm very optimistic by this year we'll start to see the outcome of that.
The word I picked from you is hopeful, and I want to believe Nigerians will be hopeful. Abba Aliyu, SA to the Minister of Power on Policy. Thank you very much. You're doing a good job.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, then that has been the program today, talking about 2020 in retrospect. COVID-19, no doubt, has affected a lot of sectors in the year 2020. And as we begin this year, let us be hopeful, borrowing the word from Abba here. Thank you very much for your time. I'm Ruth Aguele, but don't forget to stay tuned to the NTA, because at the top of the hour, talking about 7 p.m., we'll be having a repeat broadcast of the President's New Year message. So you stay tuned, and Happy New Year once again.
Federal Republic of Nigeria.